A blessed good morning to everyone, and welcome to this online webinar presentation and discussion. The Ministry of the Public Service, Learning and Development Directorate, in collaboration with Mrs. Alison Browne-Ellis, Life Lessons by ABE, is extremely proud to present to you this webinar presentation and discussion on leadership and HR, the role of emotional intelligence. I am your moderator, Sherwin Ellis, Senior Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate, the Ministry of the Public Service. These online information webinars are essentially a part of our future. Therefore, as we begin this informative session, the protocols and ground rules for this presentation are as follows. Kindly mute your microphone and disable your video. Pause and/or minimize any distractions as much as possible. In addition, I would like you at various stages and points during the presentation to take some time to reflect on your own experiences. Important enough, kindly enjoy the presentation, and I really want you to participate. Please note that you will be able to post your questions, comments to the presenter and share what you have learned. And this will be done via the chat option only. This chat option can be seen on the bottom of your screen. After the presentation, there is a question and answer segment where you are free to lend your voice. And again, I'm really excited as the moderator to hear from you. We are recording the presentation and it will be made available to you. Joining me now to enlighten you for today's presentation is Mrs. Alison Browne-Ellis. Alison Browne-Ellis is an experienced corporate executive with over 24 years of expertise. In her capacity, she leads a dynamic team and sets strategy for Cape Shepherd Card Barbados, Inc., known as PACE Digital. Alison has successfully led her company to acquire the status of the first non-financial institution in the English-speaking Latin American Caribbean region to obtain a principal membership license with Visa International, while spearheading the launch of one of Barbados' first digital payment wallets that is available to small business customers and supports the government's Easy Pay Plus payment platform. Prior to her current role as CEO, Alison spent 13 years at First Caribbean International Bank. She has a proven track record in leading change initiatives in the payments industry with expertise in implementation of innovative products, business development, marketing, credit, and customer experience strategies. Alison is an experienced corporate executive who, Alison holds an executive diploma from the Ivy Business School, Western University, and an MBA with distinction from the University of Surrey. She's also a certified John Maxwell team coach. She's a past vice president and council member of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where she still chairs the Marketing and Communications Committee. Alison recently participated in Barbados' mission to the UAE as a member of the private sector. Despite starting from humble beginnings, Alison has managed to successfully build her career and is well respected within the financial services sector. Today, Alison juggles many hats while maneuvering the rigors of the corporate world. As a mother, wife, daughter, board committee member, and professional mentor to many, Alison is passionate about the professional development of our future leaders, which has led to the recent launch of her new book. Her book, Life Lessons, A Purpose-Driven Leadership Journey, is a testament that it really does not matter where you start and to what is possible when dreams and aspirations are married with self-belief, hard work, determination, consistency, and a strong faith in God. Alison is also the founder of Boss Ladies United, a professional development and networking association for women. I now hand you over to Mrs. Browne-Ellis and thank her for accepting this invitation. Over to you, Alison.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Sherwin. I keep promising that I need to shorten my bio, but thank you so much to the team this morning for inviting me to share with you and for the opportunity to hopefully leave some impactful words with you on a topic that is actually very, very important. I think today I was asked to speak to you on leadership and HR, and I thought that the perfect message to deliver is one that speaks to emotional intelligence, just because it is an area in business that from where I sit as a leader, I see we have many, many gaps that we need to fill, and it is something that I thought this would be the perfect synergy in terms of our conversation. So again, thanks for having me. And this morning, as with most things, I had some technical challenges, so I'm not able to see some of the notes that I've made. So I'm going to try to do my very best not to compromise the quality of the presentation for today. I think what I would really want us to get out of today's webinar in terms of all the participants here is for you to have an appreciation of leadership and the perspective of the power of the vision. As a leader myself, I would say to you that one of the most impactful things that you need to bring to the table is a vision that keeps your team inspired and keeps your team focused. And why I'm tying that to emotional intelligence is because many times as leaders, we have to have an appreciation for people, because leadership is all about people. So we're going to talk about the power of emotional intelligence and leading with emotional intelligence and the success factors that come from leading with emotional intelligence. And we're also going to look at the components of emotional intelligence, because for you to understand anything at all, you need to understand the framework and the inputs so that you can understand the desired impact or results. And then I'm just going to leave you with a few tips in terms of emotional intelligence mastery. So how do you get better at this thing that has become such a buzzword for so many years and in recent years and in so many circles? So that's what we're going to cover. I tend to speak very quickly, but I also think that I speak very clearly. So if there are any comments, I would say just make your notes and we can go through those in the Q&A. And there are some points at which I may ask you a question, and I'm hoping that you can put your responses in the chat. Unfortunately, I'm juggling one screen and I'm not sure if I'm able to see the chat, but by the time I get there, I may have figured it out. So without any further delay, just jumping straight into leadership. And this is a word we hear very, very often. And it is important that you understand that leadership is very different from management, okay? Many persons align the two as though they're the same, and they're not. When you're talking about management, you're really just talking about the execution of the processes and procedures. When you're talking about leadership, it's really the development of your people, your processes, and your performance. So the desired impact, the desired impact that you're looking for. And there's a direct correlation to leadership and to HR. And that's why today I'm going to try to bridge the gap so you have an understanding as to the important role that HR professionals play in supporting their leadership teams. And I just want to start by asking you, when you think of leadership, what are some of the words that come to mind for you immediately? If you can drop those in the chat, and that's my first attempt at seeing whether I could see what's happening in the chat. What are some of those words that come to mind for you immediately when you think of the word leadership? And we'll just 1 minute, one second, I would say, just in the interest of time, because we have a lot of material to cover. Someone says charismatic, so you've helped me to test that. I can see what is coming through. Guiding. Give me a few more words and then we'll move on. Influence, big one. Empowerment, motivating. Okay, perfect. I would definitely say to you that as a leader who is very, very passionate about the development of people, that you guys have nailed it this morning, because leadership really is about being able to empower your teams. It's about leading teams through change. It's about being able to inspire others and really help them to understand the why of what they're doing. It helps them to understand where the role that they're playing in part of taking the business forward or the organization. And it is very important that you understand, because leadership is all about people, processes, and performance, that there's a critical role that you have to play as a leader, because everything rises and falls on the leadership, right, of the organization. And this is why sharing the vision is so very important. There's no success in terms of the development of your people, in terms of the execution of the procedures and the desired performance that you want for your organization, if you are not able to inspire. You must be able to share that vision in such a way that it becomes inspirational, right? And as we talk about leadership, I want you to have an understanding very, very clearly that leadership is about the vision and responsibility and not about power. And many times as leaders, this is why influence is so important, because that's what leadership is about. It's not about exercising power and a heavy hand to get people to do things, because you will always feel the friction that comes from that. And that's why we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. What leadership really is about is sharing that vision so that your teams have an understanding of the North Star. Where are you headed? Where are we taking this organization? What role am I playing in the process? What is my expected contribution? And how am I as an individual contributing to that, so that I actually can get up on mornings and feel inspired to come to work. I can feel inspired in team meetings to share my ideas and my contribution. And it is very, very important that you understand that. I think it is the most important thing for any leader to be able to one, kind of carve out what that vision is, and hopefully they do it with the input of their teams. But the most important thing is to share that vision. And this is why the HR role is so, so very important. So when we talk about the power of the vision, it is because you need that North Star or those guiding principles that your teams are going to rely on. It is very important that you understand that here are the benefits of sharing the vision. Being able to share the vision as a leader, it helps persons to connect with why they are doing what they're doing. Many times people come to work and it's about a salary, but if you are really inspiring your team, it's going to go way beyond that. Your people are going to feel as though they want to be a part of the process, right? And it also offers that roadmap or the North Star for your team to follow. That is very important. People need to know where they're heading. Otherwise, they're just literally just going with the flow. And there are times when going with the flow means that you're remaining stagnant. You're not going anywhere, right? And as an organization, the goal is always to improve. I lead my team with a mantra of continuous improvement, because they need to understand that I want them to grow as much as I want the organization to grow, and we're doing that in parallel. That you understand that vision inspires persons and teams into action, and it also offers clarity and focus on the execution. And we all know that execution is very, very important. It's one thing to have a vision, another thing to have a strategic plan, but if you don't have execution, it means you're not going anywhere. You just have like some really good strategic documents in a folder somewhere, right? And the other important driver for vision is that it really helps to encourage positive engagement and collaboration among your people. And I cannot emphasize this enough. So for those of you that put in the chat that leadership is about influence and empowerment, you actually nailed it. And this is why it is so important that you're sharing the vision so that you can continue to build a team that is focused in the right direction. But here's the thing. Let's talk about the leadership fundamentals. And I have to bring this in because as a leader, and I know we may have some leaders on the call, and we may have some emerging leaders, and we may not have some leaders, but we have persons that are in positions where they may be aspiring to leadership. So I want you to understand that as a leader, the first thing you need to understand is who you are as a leader. That is the most important thing that I need you to understand. And the reason for that is because you bring your own mannerisms and characteristics and style to how you lead and interact with your team. And that is very important. You cannot separate who you are as a person day to day to the style that you bring to leadership, because then you're not going to be authentic. And the problem with not being authentic is that whatever you're producing in terms of the image you're carrying is not sustainable, right? One of the things I speak very often on is building a brand of excellence, because we need to understand that we have to show up, and we have to show up authentically. Otherwise, people start to see us as flaky. So it's very important that you know who you are as a leader. But once you have established who you are, your goal as a leader is to build influence. And the reason why you need influence, as we spoke about earlier, is that it is a critical leadership trait. If you cannot build influence, then you're really not going to be able to carry the team towards the vision and the North Star. And then it's about modeling the way. There's this saying that I absolutely love, is that the best example you could ever give your team is in how you show up. You have to set the tone, you set the way, you set the standard for what your leadership is and what they should be aspiring to. Not that they have to be like you, but you are a good example of what to aspire to as a leader. And then it's about fostering inclusion and uplifting others. As we all know, in terms of collaboration is critical. But if the leader doesn't get this core wheel of leadership fundamentals right, then it means that something about the way that they're executing and interacting with their teams is going to be off. And I always say that, and I always pull in self-management, because if you cannot manage yourself, then it's a very unlikely probability that you can manage anyone. And the reality is that the more grounded you are in your leadership capability, your competence, your confidence, then the better you are at influencing your team, because they admire you, they're inspired by you. And that is the best mix for being able to focus on those processes and that performance, right? That's what the linkage is. So, I'm just not going to spend a long time here, but if you wanted to take a note or take this Snapchat, these are some questions that I would typically ask persons that I'm mentoring, and I do quite a bit of mentoring. If someone says to me, well, I'm new to leadership and I'm really struggling, this is what I would normally put them through in terms of an assessment. What are your leadership values? You need to know what those are. What do you stand for? What image are you trying to portray? And that has to be tied back to who you are at the core does not go away because you've been given a title, right? As a matter of fact, I'm a firm believer that leadership is not about titles. Leadership is about your ability to influence. And that's one of the things that John Maxwell speaks about. I'm John Maxwell certified, and one of the things he speaks about very, very, very frequently is that leadership is all about influence. The other question that's very important is, what's your unique style? My style of leadership is very unique. I'll have to say to you, I'm probably one of the youngest female CEOs in Barbados, and I'm also one that is very social media. And the reason why I do that is because I want persons to see what is possible. And I think in my bio, you would have heard that I came from very humble beginnings. It is not usual for CEOs and persons within C-suite levels to share as openly as I share. So that is part and parcel of my unique style, but that is also tied to my core values, because for me as a person, helping others to develop is part of what I've determined my purpose to be in this life, right? So it's about understanding yourself a bit more so that you could really kind of understand what your unique style is. And are you a leader by title, or are you a leader by function? These are things that you literally have to ask yourself when you are, really rooted in your leadership. And what does your character say about you? And the reality is that, and this is what I'm speaking on personal branding, half of the times people don't understand, they have an image of themselves, but others have an image of them. And the image that others have of them is typically, that's the brand that goes forward. So it's not so much about how we see ourselves, but how others see us. And sometimes that's where the hard evaluations come, and that really shape people up. But the reality is that sometimes you literally have to put yourself out there and expose yourself to get better at what you do. Because if you ask 5 persons, what is your character? And all 5 persons tell you things that you don't want to hear, or you're not thinking is your character, then you know that you have some work to do, right? So it's a real exercise that I like to put persons through. And I'll also say to you that in order to build your trust as a leader, you need to be consistently exhibiting competence, connection, and character. And I say that because in these 4 sides of leadership, you need to understand that there's inside out leadership. And when I say inside out leadership, this is where the leader is beginning to measure their personal success based on the level of significance that they're bringing to the role, right? And the level of achievement of the business goals and the mission, in terms of the mission and what value, what level of impact that they're creating. So this is where the leader is really focused on, how good am I, and how is that being executed and being perceived. And that's important too, because the more successes you have under your belt, the better you feel and the more confident you become. But that cannot be the only side of leadership. And this is why that's in this quadrant, the outside leadership now is about your ability to influence. And guess what? The more you do, the more you achieve, the more you engage with people in a way that is respectful and inspiring, then the more you're able to build the confidence. And that's where your outside leadership comes from. It really focuses on how you as a leader are modeling the way for others to follow. And that is very important. There's something called servant leadership. And this is where you focus on putting others above yourself. And the reality is that for me as a leader, when I'm fighting for anything, half of the times I'm fighting for things for my people. And the reason for that is that I want to treat people how I would be treated. And I'm not going to sit here and feel good that, okay, because I'm the leader, I'm getting X benefits. And I'm wondering what is happening to my team, right? So there's always this focus on people, there's focus on improving people, and this focus, and it's a genuine focus. It's not because somebody asks, it's because you're thinking about them. And that's the kind of leadership that you want to aspire to. There's also the side-by-side leadership. And what side-by-side leadership looks like is about you building and uplifting your team so that you grow together. One of the things I say to my team very often is that no man is supposed to be left behind. If we are growing this business, and if you know Pace Digital, we've done a lot of transformation. And I could look across my team and I can see how every single person in the team has developed over the last 11 years that I've been in the role. And that for me is one of my success markers, because no man must be left behind. And I'm doing that while leading them from the side, while leading alongside of them, because it's not always about top down, bottom up. It's really sometimes as leaders, we have to walk along the side with the team. And then the final side of leadership is your upside down leadership. And this is where you reach a stage where you realize that your leadership is way beyond you, right? Your leadership is bigger than you. Your purpose transformation of processes, transformation of departments, transformation of the company, transformation of the people. It's about how do I coach the persons under my care in such a way that they're now excelling in what they are doing. And I always say that this last one, where it's upside down leadership, this is where the real transformational leaders reside, because you recognize that you bring about more positive change as you're leading your people. And I stuck this slide in because it's important that you understand that there are different sides of leadership, and it's about finding the right balance in all four of these quadrants. This one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I just wanted to emphasize the point on leadership, because it is important that you understand that your core values are what should act as your guiding principles when you're dealing with times of uncertainty. So for many of you, we've just gone through the pandemic, and I would say that if you were a leader in that time, it was probably your most challenging time. And therefore, it is important that you understand that your true character actually came out in that time, right? And how your team perceives you is probably, if you really wanted to understand what your team thinks of you when you're dealing with challenges, is the best time to seek feedback, because they'll tell you, you know what, you didn't communicate with us enough. You know what, you didn't listen to us enough. You know what, you weren't transparent enough. And you know what, we weren't clear as to where you were taking us. So it is very important that you collectively look at all of these things when you're leading in times of uncertainty. But that being said, all of that comes from who you are as a person, which kind of falls into how you then become and are shaping yourself as a leader. And I really want to switch gears now and help you to understand how I am making the connection to the leadership and to the HR synergies. Because as a leader in a business, I can tell you that while I'm focusing on executing the vision of the business alongside with my team, there's the level of execution and the level of the way that I communicate the vision is what helps to shape the culture of the organization. And guess what? The culture of the organization speaks to the level of success that the company will have, because ultimately you can only have satisfied customers if you have very satisfied employees. And the reality that HR is the arm of the business that helps you with that level, helps leaders like myself with that level of communication. We have to set a clear vision which feeds into the culture, but then there's a communication of that. And for us to achieve any level of success, that communication must be constant, it must be clear, it must be concise, and that is where HR's job comes in terms of setting the policies and the procedures and helping to guide the leaders through the whole process, through the entire process. So I'm going to pause here just to ask you another question, because I want to know from you, what do you see? If you could just drop that in the chat for me, I would love to hear from some of you. What is the first thing you see? I don't want you to overthink it. I'm going to go to the chat. Just tell me what you see, and then we can go from there. So again, a few seconds. Two faces, definitely a response I get all the time. Somebody sees a pedestal. Any other responses? Two faces and a pedestal. So some people are seeing both. Pedestal again. I'm surprised. There's one thing that comes up all the time that I'm not hearing. So a vase. I've heard that. Two faces and a trophy. Okay, and still one other thing that I'm accustomed hearing all the time. I'm not seeing it. So one more attempt, and then I'm going to share what that is. Trophy. All right, so I have heard trophy before. I've definitely heard the faces. I've heard the reflection. So really good job, guys. And then I've heard the vase and the pedestal. The only other thing that there we go. I think Aline is saying the hourglass. That's the only other thing that that person say when they see this image. And most of the times, thank you guys so much for your contributions. Most of the times in any presentation that I do, I always find a way to incorporate this image. And the reason why is that I actually think it is such a powerful image, because what you guys have just proven is that we as people, we see things differently. Right? We as people can have different views and perspectives. And the reason why this is so important is because many times we believe that once someone doesn't have the same perspective as us, that something is wrong. So I'm just going to demystify that and say to you that especially with leaders and HR and how we manage through situations, we need to have an appreciation for the fact that people are different and that people have different views and perspectives that should be respected. And this is where the emotional intelligence comes in. Because what happens in many organizations is that the person that kind of tends to have a very different view than others, they tend to become or almost seen as though they're rogue or they're indifferent. And I just want you to understand that this is where emotional intelligence comes in, because we need to recognize and accept that we sometimes in how we are seeing and perceiving others, it is because of our level of emotional intelligence. So that's what we're going to kind of transition to. But this is one of my absolute favorite quotes of all time. So I just wanted to share it at this point, because in as much as we see things differently to others, sometimes we need to understand that all we can change is ourselves. And sometimes that changes everything. And I just wanted to leave that quote with you to muller over, because sometimes we're so busy trying to change others that we don't realize that sometimes we ourselves are the problem, right? And I firmly believe that. So let's talk now about emotional intelligence and how I am making the connection. The reason I shared the fact that people see things differently is because with your level of emotional intelligence, it helps you to focus on these particular views: your self-awareness, the level of empathy you bring, the level of motivation, how you self-regulate, and your social skills. And collectively, this is what people define as emotional intelligence. And I'm going to expand on that some more so you understand that emotional intelligence, and sometimes it's referred to as EQ or EI, and it's very different from IQ, which is about your academic kind of way of thinking and how smart you are. Your EQ or EI is about your emotional balance and what you bring in terms of your emotional interactions with others. It's about your emotional feelings, how you manage them, how you allow those feelings to impact others around you, because that's the reality. Sometimes we are not consciously aware of our own feelings, and they then have an impact, sometimes an adverse impact, on the other people that are around us. So when we're talking about EQ or EI or emotional intelligence, it's really about knowing yourself, knowing what drives you. This is why it's so important that you understand that the only person you can change is yourself, right? It's about taking responsibility for your emotions so that you are more focused on how you respond versus react. And I always say to persons, regardless of what's happening in your environment, you want to be so poised that you can assess the situation, even though it might upset you, and you could still stay calm and collected, because in that moment, your goal is to respond and not react. And I just wanted to, it's really about ensuring that we understand the power of EQ, because it really, really helps us to become a lot more successful when you can better manage your emotions. So if you imagine leaders that are constantly flying off the handle, then you can understand the kind of respect or lack thereof that the team may have for that particular leader. And I know we don't have any of those leaders on this call today, but the reality is that how you act in a moment speaks a lot about your character. So therefore, you want to be able to better control those emotions instead of those emotions controlling you. And the reality is that you also want to stay positive, even in the face of negative situations. And the reason for that is because it better helps you to manage your anger and your frustrations. But this is not an easy process. This is something that you have to become so intentional about. In my younger days in my career, I had a manager who used to say to me, don't you ever get upset, because we would both go into our leader and we'd be making presentations, and I could see that she's visibly upset, and to the point of the body twitching, and the facial expression has gone to anger, and I would just be there soaking it all in. But it is something that I had to master, because I recognized that the leader at the time used to be intentionally coming after us hard. So I realized that every time I gave her that power, she would upset me. So the reality is that I started to reverse that behavior, and I just maintain a calm spirit. I may come out of the meeting and then lose my cool, but what I wanted to stop doing was giving her the power in the moment. And that comes with a high degree of self-control, and self-management. But we're going to talk a little bit about how you regulate yourself when you are starting to feel those emotions emerging to the surface. But I just wanted to touch very quickly on what are some of these success factors, because it is important that you understand that having a high level of emotional intelligence, it actually helps to improve your performance. It impacts your confidence level and your level of self-control in the situation, right? You might not like the situation, but you need to understand that the way you respond in the moment says a lot about you. And sometimes that goes a long way to how persons are viewing you, right? Your reputation then starts to precede you. It's also important that you understand, this is a statistic that I noted, that 75% of employers, they actually say that they value emotional intelligence over IQ. So because academic stuff, you can train people up, but the feelings and the emotions and the empathy and these things that they bring to the table, those are not things you can train people. Those are things that persons first have to recognize for themselves and actually put into practice. And this is why more businesses are actually going the route in their recruitment process of having psychometric tests done, especially for their senior leaders, because leadership is all about people. So if you put people in the top that are not people persons, then you know that you're already going to start from a deficit. You're going to have a problem. So the modern companies, and I know that we're dealing with a different kind of structure here, but a lot of senior leaders are now coming into organizations having been vetted for their EQ, so that even if you're still hired for the position, there's a development plan that's in place that is tied to the weaker areas that your psychometric test may have picked up. And the other success factors is about really being able to regulate your emotions so that you don't get stuck in a place of resentment. Because here's what happens. Sometimes we get upset with a person. The person has moved on, forgotten all about the situation, and we are still upset. So the reality is that it's about building healthier kind of structures and strategies to be able to deal with conflict. And this is very important, because you don't, again, I always see it as empowering people. If you have not let go of a situation that has created a problem in the past, it means that you're empowering that person to continue to erode your level of happiness in the moment, right? So you want to be able to self-regulate and let these things go. And it's also about becoming more aware of your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can continue to adapt and evolve and really continue to add value to whatever situation it is. And the last point I will make in terms of why emotional intelligence and managing your emotions is so important is because as you're progressing in your career, you do not want to have attached to you the label of being emotionally unstable. And as a woman, I will say to you that many times we women get labeled in this way because we wear our emotions on the sleeve. So it is time for us to stop letting our emotions rule us and being more intentional about being able to be conscious of our mannerisms, be conscious of how our body language is projecting, and really focus on how we will respond to the facts that have been presented presented and not how we will react because we don't like what someone has said or how they have said it. And I know that's a lot easier to do, but we'll go in now to the components of emotional intelligence, because now as I break down these components, you get a better understanding as to how you can do some of the things that I'm talking about. So when we're talking about self-awareness, which is really the emotional self-awareness, how are you are recognizing your own feelings? What are you feeling in the moment? And how is that going to impact others? This is very, very important for our HR professionals. And the reason for that is that if you're in HR, you probably have people coming at you all day long with complaints. They don't like this. They wish their manager would do this. Somebody has not done this yet, or I want this. And these are requests you're getting fielded at you every single day. But the reality is that this particular morning, you've come to work and you're not in a good place. So how do you respond when you're not in a good place and still project confidence, still project empathy, without having an appreciation for what you yourself are feeling in that moment? It is totally acceptable to acknowledge and connect with what you are feeling, because that's the only way you can go to the second pillar, which is self-management. Depending on what you're feeling, you now have the ability to manage to self-regulate. That's the word I like to call, where you are essentially saying, okay, I'm feeling this, but you know what? I need to put these impulsive feelings I need to just put them aside for now, because the person I'm engaging with in this moment does not deserve an angry me. They do not deserve a moody me. They do not, because the reality is that they don't know what I'm dealing with. They don't know what I'm going through. So now I'm more conscious about how I am engaging with others. How much more control am I bringing? How positive am I looking at the situation? How adaptable am I in the moment? Because it is very important that you understand that self-regulation helps you to manage your stress level. It's about making sure that you're not so emotionally upset that it's allowing you to override what would be your basic minimum standards, because how you deal with a situation when you are upset and not being able to self-regulate normally is very different than how you would deal with a situation when you are what we would consider in a normal mood, right? You're not upset, you're not, you tend to bring a different mannerism to when you are dealing with something when your moods are all over the place. So self-regulation is very important. It's also called self-management, but the reality is that you can only manage yourself if you are aware. So that is very important. And then we go to the third pillar, which is your social awareness. And this is where, how aware are you of how what you are feeling in the moment is impacting the others around you? How is your body language? What are your gestures? Really understanding and empathizing with others, because you are tuned in and you're actively listening. And I spoke about active listening earlier, to other people's opinions and perspectives. This is now how you are socially engaging with others, and making sure that you can learn to spot not just your emotions, but the emotions of others. Because, and I'll say this to you, I have a young lady on my team, very, very good, but she's not a morning person. And I'm a morning person. So when I first came to the business, I really struggled to connect because she was just very low key on morning, whereas morning is when I'm at my peak. And it took me a while to really understand that my bubbliness on mornings was offsetting her. So because she's just not a morning person. So not to say because I'm the leader that I kind of my job was to completely pull her out of the mood she was in at the moment. I just started to learn her better. So when I had a particular request, I would let her kind of settle in a little bit and then start to engage with her once she's settled and had her breakfast. And, I deprioritized what I thought in the moment, because I've learned her sufficient to know that when she does deliver it for me, it's going to be excellent. But if I bombard her too early, then it means that I'm going to throw her off. So it's really important that you understand understand the persons that you're dealing with so that you can read a room. I don't know how many of you have heard the power of reading a room, but when you become a leader, you need to be able to read the vibe and the energy in the room. You need to know who your influencers are, because remember I said leadership is not just about having a title. There are people without the titles within the hierarchy of an organization that are leaders. And what you want as a leader is to know who those are. Right? You need to know who are the leaders that can influence the pack, the rest of the team, and really could undermine what you're trying to achieve in terms of the vision. And it's so important that as a leader, you could understand, you could read a room, and you could know who those people are, because those are the ones that, believe it or not, you want to have a good rapport with, because they're the ones that could really cripple your strategies. And as you know, it's just, again, being very intentional. It's, again, being able to be so emotionally intelligent that you understand who you need to be connected to and with, and at the points at which you need to connect with them. Because if there's unrest brewing within your team, you want to get to that very quickly, but you could only get to that if you are socially aware and you could make the connections where you kind of get the informal what's really going on here. Right? And that sometimes is very, very important. So we know that that goes a long way, but it's about, you're a leader, you walk, or even you're in HR and you walk into a room and there's so much tension. You ask if there are questions, nobody wants to answer. You know something is off. You could read people's body language. So this is where the social awareness comes from. And guess what? Your level of social awareness helps you with your relationship management, which is the fourth pillar. Your relationship management is about how are you managing the feelings of those around you? How good at you are building relationships, right? How do you work to manage through conflicts, and how do you handle situations in terms of helping to coach people and mentor people and foster the teamwork that is required? And most times this helps to really lead you as a leader to what we call inspirational leadership, because you don't want leadership just from the sense of, you know, giving people orders. That is not leadership. Okay, leadership is not about power. Leadership is about influence, and that's how you become an inspirational leader. So again, just to recap, it's about the self-management. How aware are you of your own moods and feelings? And then about the self-management, how can you self-regulate? Because I might be having a crappy day today and none of you know, because I'm able to pull it together and I'm able to come and make this presentation to you. Right? But then there's the social awareness. How aware am I of everyone everyone and everything happening around me, so that I could understand the level of you know, the effort I need to put in to remedy things as they come up. And then it's about building relationships when we're talking about the fourth pillar in terms of relationship management. Very, very important. So as I'm coming to the kind of closing of my presentation, I wanted to leave with you what I consider, and these are just points that I consider to be emotional. How do you master your emotional intelligence, right? And these are just a few things that I will share with you, because I think it is important that when you have a better awareness of what's happening within you and around you, that it becomes so much easier to identify your stress factors. Do you know that there's some people that just, for whatever reason, they rub us the wrong way, and we can't necessarily nail it, we just know. And half of the times it's because our level of emotional intelligence has identified something about that individual that just does not sit right with us. But the reality is that when you are in HR or when you are a leader, it does not matter. You have to be able to put that aside and engage in such a way that is professional, that is fair, and that is transparent when you're dealing with people. Because the golden rule says treat people how you would like them to treat you. And just because you don't have a great relationship with someone does not mean that they don't deserve the best of you. And I hope that that makes sense, right? So just in terms of being able to identify your stress factors, it's really about how much calmer and collected can you be within a situation. It is so important that you understand that your ability to think logically is what really helps to make a difference to the outcome of a situation. The logical side of how you're thinking is only empowered by the emotional side of you. If you are allowing your emotions in a moment because management has made a decision to throw you off, then you are not bringing your best game, right? You need to be able to say logically, okay, well, this makes sense. You know what, logically, this does not make sense. But because of how many times what happens is how we say things, how we do things, how we present things, how we react to things, that causes the other person who might not be as emotionally intelligent either to then you've now hit a brick wall, because you're now communicating from a position of emotion and not from a position of factual logical position. So it's very important that you understand. And I always say to persons, when you're trying to master your emotional intelligence, you have to check yourself more, right? So if you want to make a note of these, please feel free. Check yourself more. Allow yourself some time to process what you have heard. Quiet time, sometimes you don't always have to respond in the moment. Sometimes you just want things to settle in. You know, you want to question your own thought process. You don't always have to be right. And I'll say this to you, this is something I do with my team very often. When they present me with something and I'm not certain how I feel about it, I say, let me sleep on that. And they will almost tell you every single time, once I've slept on it, I always bring a different perspective, because if I respond in a moment, they may not get the best of what they're trying to achieve, and I may throw off the outcome. So for me to be able to sleep on it, which is something that I say very often to the team, if I am not seeing the direction in which they're going, I'm not seeing the vision, sometimes this happens, and I always commit to getting back to them, and I always do, because it's the quiet time allows me to think through what it is they're trying to achieve, and then I may go back and say, hey guys, I don't really like the direction, but I like the initiative, how about this? And then be able to share with it that way, right? The other thing is in your self-regulation. It's about recognizing and managing your own disruptive behaviors, because we do have them. And the only way that we could really address those in terms of being able to now master is to recognize them. When we recognize that our facial expressions are not cutting it, it becomes about how we then start to really become intentional about when your leader is saying something, or when another team member is saying something and your mouth is not pushed up in the air. You now have a more neutral look on your face. And I'll share this joke with you. When I first started working with my director, one of my director, who's my second in command, I new to her, she's new to me, and I'm new to her, and we're just happened that COVID happened around the same time, and we were constantly on Zoom meetings, and I would message her in the chat and say, fix your face. And I literally used to do that with the time, because as obviously we're in very intense conversations, in very intense conversations, and sometimes you don't like what you're hearing, but her facial expressions took over. And as part of my way of coaching her, I used to say, fix your face. And we would always have a quick chat on after, because I literally wanted her to understand that because someone is saying something you do not like does not mean that it should be showing all over your face, right? So it's about now being able to self-regulate. Practice self-motivation. This is something I say all the time. Do not wait for others to motivate you. Motivation is an intrinsic internal thing. You have to find sources that help to motivate you. I personally listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of sermons. I do things that really help me to be in a more positive position, so that when I come in and I'm facing my day, I am now so grounded that I could say, like, literally bring it on, right? And that's very important. Practicing more empathy. That's the other mastery that I would share. Sometimes we forget that people have feelings and people have emotions, and it is very important that in the moment that we're practicing more empathy, because we want to place a higher sense of value on people, so that, you know, this is a colleague, so I respect their opinion even if I don't agree with it. And that is very important. It's about being able to practice being more solutions oriented and less judgmental. So as I said earlier, there are times where I may not agree with a particular initiative, but I'm more solutions focused, because I then help them to refine the initiative and make it better. And that's the kind of thinking and the kind of approach that you want to be bringing to how you are showing up. And then it's about, please, I'm begging you, not making decisions when you are in a bad mood. But guess what? You should not make decisions when you're in a really good mood either, right? It's about bringing balance, because your emotions sometimes can throw you off of what is the real objective and the real focus. So always kind of make the most important decisions you need to make when you are in a more balanced mood. So not too much of a bad mood and not too much of a good mood. And then the last point I would share with you in terms of a practical tip to getting better in terms of managing your emotions is to look for those blind spots. And you cannot find things that you're not aware exist. So this is where feedback becomes very important. If you do not have a mentor, find yourself a good mentor. Find someone either within the organization or totally outside of the organization that you admire, and first, internally, maybe get some feedback from others as to, you know, what do you think about me? I'm trying to do some assessments. I want to improve. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better contributor. And then find a mentor who matches your kind of vision for your life, right? And where you want to take yourself, so that you could now become conscious and very intentional about improving those blind spots. So again, I just kind of close in on this point that you understand that emotional intelligence is a lifetime process. That this is not a one-off thing. There will be always things to throw us off of our game. The challenge or the question is, how intentional are we becoming? This is not something that you wake up one morning and just master, because you're human and these are real feelings you're dealing with. But we got to start to train our minds so that we're continually conscious of how we are allowing our emotions to take over, because we are in what the business experts call a very VUCA world, which is, you know, things are very volatile, they're very uncertain, they're very in terms of they're very complex and they're very ambiguous, right? And that combination makes for a horrible combination when you're talking about managing people and processes and performance, because the reality is that nothing is certain, and that is where your emotions start to get the better of you. Because when things are going great, you know, you're showing the emotions that make sense to that kind of environment. But when things are not going so great, you then have to wonder, you know, how am I managing through? And that's where the focus on emotional intelligence becomes so much more important. I would just say to you that emotionally intelligent people think before they speak. They think in terms of how to handle tough situations. They're generally better at handling tough situations. They practice greater self-control. They tend to look at the bigger picture, very, very important. So they're not kind of just in the moment, they're kind of thinking down the road, emotionally intelligent people. And they are willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Very, very important, because remember I said this is a continuous process. And the last point I will make before taking questions is that emotional intelligent people understand the power is in responding and not reacting. So that is my presentation for you today. I think hopefully Sherwin will tell us if we have time for questions, and I'm here and ready to answer any questions that you may have. But let's kind of just thinking through our objectives was so that you understand the power of the vision as a leader, what that means, the correlation between, you know, the power of sharing the vision and how that connects, and how the HR team is helping to support the leader throughout that entire process, and then understanding what emotional intelligence is, as well as how emotional intelligence makes you more successful. But then in real terms, what is a process for emotional intelligence? So that level of self-awareness, that level of self-management, that level of your social awareness, and that level of how are you building relationships. And then hopefully you were able to take away some of the points in terms of mastery of your emotional intelligence. So I will pause there and thank you for your time. I actually am going to share the
Alison,
yes,
just go back to the one with the questions.
Okay,
right,
so we're here.
Yes. Thank you very much, Alison. I'm
here.
I'm still here, so smiling, Alison. That was so much. Thanks so much for assisting us in this HR Forum webinar for HR practitioners in the public service. What I found this presentation was extremely timely and very enlightening for me. And I believe for us as HR practitioners in the public service to also utilize, especially in our daily lives. You've really given us some salient information for us to, and I think you use the word self-reflect, and in essence, took more in depth or look at us more in depth when we are, especially that slide you had there with the 4 components of emotional intelligence. So again, it's at this point that we want to engage you, the participants who are listening to Alison, to share your questions, your comments in the chat, so that I can share with Alison and she can respond to your comments and so. So it's over to you, participants. Feel free to, self-reflect, continue sharing your questions so that that Alison can assist us as well. I'm saying very informative. Thank you for an excellent presentation. They want to know when is part 2 of this presentation coming.
Sure, if someone wants to know when if I can be their mentor.
I think that because you had mentioned earlier also about that coaching and mentoring aspect and those leadership fundamentals. I'm seeing another comment. Thank you, very thought-provoking, that it has caused me to reflect on my own practice. Colleagues, keep typing your questions, please. Yes, thanks very much, Ms. Aline. Really informative presentation. Thank you. Alison, question. You spoke about leadership fundamentals, who you are as a leader, building influence. What any other tips you have for us as well with those leadership fundamentals?
I would definitely say to you that as a leader, especially in these times that we're in, we have to do a lot more listening to our teams, because what I've learned during COVID is that they have some really good ideas, right? And if you do not give them the voice to be able to share them, you're really not doing the best, you're doing an injustice to the organization. So one of the things I would say to you is that you want to build a culture where it's more collaborative and you're getting more feedback coming from all the different levels within the organization. And that's something that COVID has taught me, that the best ideas we executed, they actually came from the ground up. And I also want to really empower the persons on the call, that on the webinar today, that as a leader, you have to be able to connect with people. If you cannot connect with people, you are missing the best opportunity to deliver of your best. You as the leader have to be able to connect with people. Your ability to get things done, because you're doing it through people. I don't know about the leaders on the call, but I certainly can't do a lot of everything. So I have to be able to delegate. And when I delegate, I don't want people to think that they have to do it. I want people to want to do it, if that makes sense. So I would say to you that these are some of the things that really make a difference to how we show up. Connection is very, very important. To be able to communicate well, you must connect first. And I hope that you understand that. You have to connect from a place of genuine interest in people if you really want them to buy into the vision, or as some people will say, to drink the Kool-Aid. There's a very good question in the chat. Someone says, Sherwin, if you are, Lisa Ford, if you are an introvert, how do you manage the area of social skills and interacting with persons? It's so funny that you asked this question. It's a brilliant question. It's a question I've recently been asked in another forum that I presented for. And I would say to you that introverts actually can be very, very good at emotional intelligence. Because you are introverted does not mean that you have a disadvantage. Your emotional and your level of emotional intelligence comes from your awareness of the fact that you are an introvert. That's the first thing you need to understand. And because you are introverted, it means that you now have to be more intentional. So many people will not believe this, and every time I say it, people laugh and say no, but I used to be very introverted. And what I had to do as an emerging leader was to make a conscious effort to engage with people, to get out there more. So I'll tell you two things I used to do, Lisa. One is that as I walk into a room, I actually used to find someone, just one person, and go to them and say, literally be intentional to say, oh, I love your outfit today, just to spark a conversation, because guess what? People love to feel good about themselves, right? And then you start to break down that social awkwardness of engaging with someone that you did not know. The other thing that I would say to you as an introvert is that I became very intentional to start going to events, literally putting myself out there, because you then become familiar with certain people and you start to build relationships, and now your relationships are way beyond what you originally started. So, but these are very intentional acts that introverts have to do. One of my managers is actually very introverted, and I've literally just kind of built out her professional development plan, because for me to see her go to the next level, I need to see her interacting with her people more and on a different level, not the surface level. Really, it's about getting to know your people, so that if my daughter is sick, you know that you know something is wrong with me. You might not know the specifics, but you know me well enough to know that something is off. And that is what real, true leaders are able to identify. And I hope I answered that question.
Thanks very much, Alison. I'm seeing another question here. One of our colleagues is saying, since I work with educators and students, I would like something along the lines of developing emotionally intelligent school culture. Interesting.
That's a very interesting one. What I would say to you is that I think it's a topic that needs to be introduced at the school level. So you are very right. A lot of the times the conflicts that happen in school is because the children are lacking a level of self-awareness. So if we can get a topic like this happening at the school level, but more broken down, so it's scenario based to really help them understand, because the challenge we have now, especially coming out of COVID, is that the children have so much pent-up emotions that they're not even conscious. They subconsciously are behaving and reacting in the way that they are. And it's just throwing off the balance of how relationships are happening. They're comfortable to sit and right next to each other. And I say it all the time because my daughter is 14 years old, and message each other on the said phone while they're in the said room. So I think it's how do we start to reverse some of these behaviors that I don't think they were always there culturally, but that COVID has really now added to the mix. So I do think it's a really good point in terms of how could you break down a topic like this and make it useful in the schools. And I agree with Ryan that introverts actually, they because they're so more emotionally agile. The challenge though, Ryan, is that if you're a leader and you're introverted, you need to know when to act. And introverts sometimes can be slow to act and slow to respond, right? And remember that one of the things I said is that you are literally modeling the way when you are the leader. So you need to know when to speak up. That is what leadership is about, right? When to exercise that voice.
Thanks very much, Alison, and thanks, Ryan and colleagues, for your questions. Alison, you can just show me the slide with that something. So, colleagues, is at this time, I would also like your assistance. Just go back a bit, Alison, to the evaluate. Yes, your assistance in filling out our evaluation form, which is now probably placed in the chat. We really would like to hear from you. And I'm going to leave that evaluation open for, probably for the next hour or so that you can complete that you can give us an opportunity to let us know how we can continue to improve and so. Right? Yes, you can. Yes. So
Great.
One of my colleagues has just placed it in the chat.
Okay, well, that's kudos to you, because I think forums like these are so important for developing the people within the organization. Again, there is no progress people, so kudos to the team that has really engaged with me to put on the webinar. Because I'm so passionate about people development, Sherwin and I've been back and forth on this for quite a bit, and these are opportunities that I find it very hard to say no to, especially when I'm going to be able to get in front of not just 10 people, but in this scenario, if I'm not mistaken, I'm seeing like almost 60 people on this chat. So really, really kudos to the team within the ministry, this arm of the ministry, for being able to be so proactive. I'm just inviting you to stay connected with me if you so choose to, based on the fact that I saw so many positive comments in the chat. I would say to you, if you're not on LinkedIn, you should get on LinkedIn. I believe that all professional career people should be on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is my full name, so Alison Browne-Ellis. If you search for me, you'll find me there. I tend to speak a lot on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing. I do have a professional development blog. I try to post at least one article a month on that blog. Sometimes they're featured by the Business Authority, and they tend to pick them up, and depending on the topic, they would publish them. I'm a little lagging behind because I've just been dealing with so much recently, but I've completed writing one this week, so that should be going up on the blog soon. And I'm also very active on Instagram. You got to see a softer side of me on Instagram. LinkedIn is a more professional side, and my Instagram is Ali, ALI, Brown.jpg. And I'm also, as Sherwin said, I'm the founder of a professional development association called Boss Ladies United, which is just for women. I'm also an author. The book is called Life Lessons: A Purpose-Driven Leadership Journey. This was my COVID baby. I'm very proud of the book. Has had to date a transformational impact on career professionals. I would say to you that when I wrote the book, I was thinking of the younger generation, but I've been able to help and impact persons across all levels. I've had CEOs read my book and have some amazing transformations as a result of what I do in the book is speak about a lot of the blind spots. So if you want to hear more, you could go onto my blog, you can reach out to Sherwin, we could talk more about how you can get your hands on the book. And I've also recently, as recent as this year, launched a 365-day inspirational calendar. As I said, I'm a leader, I'm big on inspiration. So I personally have benefited from having one of these calendars on my desk for all of my career, and I've decided that I'm going to focus my calendar on women. So if you're interested, again, you could connect with Sherwin and be able to place an order. What I would say to you as well is that as a leader, I am a big reader, and reading is very, very powerful. So I thought that I would leave with you, outside of my book, obviously, some other recommendations for books that have really helped me along my journey in the last few years. Emotional Intelligence 2.0, only because that's the topic we just discussed, and that's a brilliant book. Good to Great, this is one of my my favorite books of all times by Jim Collins, Jumpstart Your Growth by John Maxwell. I have a collection of John Maxwell books because I think he's a brilliant leadership guru. And the most recent book I've just completed is Life is Messy. And actually, it was a gift from the head of Caribbean Catalyst. I was one of the panels for the Burgess Best Employers Award, and she gifted me this book. And I would have to say to you that it was very timely, just in terms of, just understanding the season I'm in and being able to really have a lot of profound takeaways from this book. So just wanted to leave these book recommendations with you. And I will take the opportunity to thank Sherwin and the team at the Ministry of Public Service for inviting me to share with you guys this morning. It has been my absolute pleasure, and I am handing over to Sherwin, but I just wanted to invite you to have an awesome remaining of your day. Just remember to be reflective. We're talking about emotional intelligence, so just be more conscious as to how you're presenting and positioning yourself for your future growth. So thank you guys so very much.
Yes, thank you, Alison. I see my director, Faye Marie Brown, has her hand up. Faye Marie.
Thank you. I really wanted, y'all know I don't normally do this, but I couldn't let this morning's presentation end without unmuting and turning my camera on to say congratulations and to commend Mrs. Browne-Ellis for an excellent presentation, and to thank you for being part of our team. We have a way in Barbados of believing that you have to know somebody to have things done or to get somewhere. And Alison, I just wanted you to know that I was just scrolling through IG one day and butt you up, literally butt up on you, and said, but who is this woman? And where she come from? And I started then following you, and I have been following you ever since.
Thank you, thank you.
So that when we were looking for participants for our HR conference, you automatically came to mind. And I am absolutely happy that we followed up on this. I really want to thank you for sharing your journey with us. I've read the book, and I want to encourage those on the call, if you're truly aspiring to be an HR practitioner and to lead from where you are, give the book a read. There've been some chapters that really resonated with me in this, and it really is just about Alison's journey. And a lot of self-reflection comes out of it. So I really want to thank you again for joining our team. I consider you now part of our family, so you will be hearing more from us. And I'm looking forward to those opportunities to continue collaborating and working with you. It was an excellent presentation. Those that missed it really missed a wonderful treat this morning. I almost missed it myself somehow. In everything going on, I was thinking it's next Thursday, it's not this Thursday. And then suddenly realized, no, it's right now. So it can get busy, I understand, but I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to being here with us. It really has made a difference for many of us, including me.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Brown. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Director Brown, thank you as well too.
That was the vote of thanks, Shirley.
Okay, so colleagues, just reminding you, participants, that the video recording of this presentation will be made available on our Directorate's YouTube channel. You can go to our YouTube channel, search for the Learning and Development Directorate, also to view when we post this one, and videos of our past presentations. So again, Alison, thank you very much. And the team here at the technical team here at the Learning and Development Directorate, I also want to say a warm thanks for your support in making this webinar possible. To every one of you, please continue to stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.